What's up guys, this is the Dragon King. If you do enjoy this video, comment down below and subscribe. Now let's begin this new video.
All of the disciples glanced up, saw the clean sky, and were relieved that the thunder had stopped. Some were relieved that they had survived, while others were crying and hugging each other. Miss Yan was standing among the ruins, worrying about where Yiyu was. Meanwhile, in another forest, two individuals were screaming in fear, and you could see Yiyu and the lovely blonde descending from the sky, cursing. And they landed hard with a thud, as there was a large explosion where they landed. Yiyu groaned as he realized he had survived, and the lovely blonde landed on top of him with a thump. Yiyu coughed up blood. The blonde buried her face as she lamented the loss of her garments. Yiyu inquired if she could get away from him. He was still in discomfort. Surprised, the blonde questioned whether he was the guy from the thunderstorm. Yiyu rose up and told her that he had been struck by lightning multiple times simply to save her, and that she hadn't even said thank you. The blonde blushed as she sought to cover herself, realizing that the hero was now looking at her. The protagonist's eyes were filled with approval as he assumed this was a bikini. The blonde flushed slightly and asked him to locate her some clothing. Yiyu smiled as he cleaned the blood from his nose and asked her where she could purchase women's clothing in the wild place. He stared directly at the hero's garments and informed them she wanted his clothes. Yiyu was taken aback by this, and he took a step back from the blonde, telling her that if he gives her his clothes, he will be nude, and he thought to himself that he would rather not be naked. The blonde told him not to be so rude to her with a cute face. The hero had a horrified expression on his face and told her not to look at him like that. But, in the end, the hero accepted, but only because she gazed at him in that way. The hero was speechless that the blonde had persuaded him to give her his garments, and she was jumping around in delight. And Yiyu was trembling from the cold and asked her what her name was, and he also wondered why the thunder was staring at her like that. She told him her name was Shui Yan, 15 minutes later, after she had finished changing. She told him that she arrived to the devil's grave to locate something, but someone tried to kill her with thunder from the skies. The hero imagined the devil's grave. He had never heard a name like this before. Yiyu and Shui Yan were traveling together and talking when the hero questioned what the devil's cemetery was. Shui Yan said that the huge devil is sealed underground, therefore the name, Devil Grave. The hero told her, mischievously smiling, that she was attacked because of the object you wished to find, and the hero assumed it must be a treasure. Shui Yan simply stated that it was a haven book of supreme spells with limitless power. Yiyu was once again astounded by the celestial scroll, and he thought what a coincidence. The hero smiled warmly and asked if she could describe the appearance of the heaven scroll. Shui Yan told him, with a strange expression on her face, that it was sparkling and encircled by enigmatic glyphs, and that it was the size of a scroll. Yiyu counted his fingers to determine whether what she was saying was right as he visualized the golden scroll, and he realized it was that golden scroll that she was referring about. The hero cursed in his head as he realized it was the same scroll that was in his head. Yiyu was concentrating on something with his hands when Shui Yan questioned, "What does holy shit mean?" Yiyu, still focused on what he was doing, just replied, "Amazing." In his imagination, the hero smiled, eager to see what was in the scroll of heaven. As a light energy began to emanate from his body, he rationalized himself by claiming that he had sustained an ancestral injury and needed to rehabilitate. He sat in a meditative condition and began cultivating. Shui Yan just told him that he was neurotic and strange. The protagonist just closed his eyes and began to concentrate, and he descended into his thoughts. He saw the golden scroll in his imagination and flew close to it. When he reached out his hand to touch it, something happened around the golden scroll. Suddenly, he realized that this was the creature book. What about the creature book? He thought to himself that this must be the utmost power of the heaven scroll. He looked into the golden scroll, and his body began to shift slightly as a result of his gaze. Shui Yan slapped him quickly and told him that he had already reached the spiritual level, and she questioned him why he had done it in such an ineffective manner. Yiyu touched his cheek in pain, perplexed by what Shui Yan was talking about. Shui Yan attempted to tell him that, in contrast, he must temper his body and allow spirit energy to enter his body in order to baptize the body and soul. Meanwhile, the hero was not paying attention. Shui Yan joyfully grinned and asked if he understood now, and she asked if he could do it now. The hero ribbed his hand on the back of his head and, with a foolish look on his face, told her no, and she dropped down with a crash. Shui Yan was enraged at the hero, shouting at him that he had just recently discovered how to absorb spirit energy from heaven, causing his body and spirit energy to resonate. Shui Yan slapped herself after realizing Yi Yu's ignorance. She informed him he lacked common sense and inquired as to how he attained the spiritual level. Yi Yu wasn't paying attention because he got a realization. And he smiled brightly and pointed to himself, telling her he was a genius. Shui Yan boasted about her spiritual level development as she told him that level 9 resonance would be wonderful if he could attain level 3. Yi Yu sat down and cultivated at that moment, and a fire aura appeared around him. Shui Yan gazed at him, pleased by his ability to improve his cultivation. After a few moments, the blonde's eyes widened in surprise. Yi Yu released a burst of energy, alarming Shui Yan. His power sent a minor shockwave throughout the area, and the blonde exclaimed in amazement that Yi Yu had reached resonance level 10. She exclaimed once more that this was the very limit. How did he do that? She inquired. Yi Yu had just taken a breath. He smiled and opened his eyes, telling her that he was a genius. Shui Yan just threw herself at him, then stroked his face with glee, and the protagonist was terrified. He was taken aback, and his eyes widened as he realized Shui Yan was ecstatic with his own accomplishment, and she asked him if he wanted to be her apprentice. The hero was simply perplexed, unsure of what was going on. Yi Yu assumed she was asking him something else when he said she had a strong taste, whatever he was thinking. He wondered if the affection between the teacher and the student excited her. She insulted him, and Shui Yan smacked him and asked him what the heck he was talking about. She huffed and said she'd be his elder sister, not his master. Yi Yu hugged her leg, a glitter in his eyes, and told her that sibling love is also good, and how he has been looking for a girl like her for a long time. Shui Yan grinned fiercely as veins shot out of her face, cursing him and punching him so hard that he fluttered off into the sky, and Yi Yu sobbed silently in the air, wondering why girls in this world are so violent. There was a campfire in the middle of the night, and Yi Yu was gazing at the sky. The blonde was meanwhile meditating. And he began to remember his parents, whom he missed terribly, and he shouted out to Shui Yan. And he asked her if anyone could cross the galaxy. Shui Yan stared at him and said that there was once a man that crossed the galaxy, but it's nearly impossible for them to do so now. Shui Yan smiled and caressed his shoulder, telling him not to think about it too much and that they would take it slowly. Yi Yu rose up and confidently declared that he will cross the galaxy. Shui Yan just stared at him, eager to hear what he had to say next. He persuaded himself with a smile that he would return home. The next day, there was a lovely ship leaving for an island or something. Two people were quietly watching the ship from the woods. Still staring at the ship, Shui Yan informed the hero that it resembled a merchant ship. She informed him she had no idea which family it belonged to. Meanwhile, Yi Yu didn't care because he was admiring the blonde melons and telling himself that maybe today he would die from a nosebleed. He leapt out of the woods and ran straight towards the ship. Shui Yan said quietly, warning him to be careful. 1 hour later, Shui Yan was still in the bushes, and she was worried about Yi Yu, and she wondered why he hadn't returned yet. The blonde was anxious and wondered if he was in trouble. A few minutes later, she heard a rumble, and her eyes widened in horror as she saw the hero fleeing for his life as many others pursued him, and she cursed, wondering why there were so many people on board. People shouted at him, telling him how dare he break into the ladies' room, while others simply yelled at him to kill this rascal. The protagonists rushed away, yelling for Shui Yan to follow, and Shui Yan wailed silently that Yi Yu had also gotten her into danger. After Yi Yu collapsed, the blonde scooped him up and yelled at him, asking if he was stealing and questioned him whether this was a theft, while a dust cloud and a mystery girl remained angry at him in the background. Shui Yan screamed at Yi Yu to cut the nonsense and get dressed in front of the mysterious girl and other people who were staring straight at the dust cloud. While dressing, Yi Yu gazed at her body and thought how beautiful she was, and he blushed from her beauty. Meanwhile, the blonde was unaware that the hero was staring at her because she was scared of the people around her. She pointed and encouraged the protagonist to look around, and when he did, He saw all of the angry faces of the people chasing him, and he cursed because he knew he was in danger now. A female approached him and called him a disgusting rascal. Yiyu got a frightened expression on his face and was a little nervous after hearing this girl label him a perverted rascal, and he told her that they had never met before and that her calling him a rascal would lead people to believe that he had flirted with her. The other folks chasing him were simply gazing at him fiercely. She yelled at him again, wondering what the heck he was on about. Zhang Yutong is the Zhang family's first daughter. Informing him that he had stolen her clothes, Yiyu gave her a worried smile and told her that these clothes belongs to Shui Yan, and he questioned her how she knew what was right and wrong. Shui Yan was astonished and furious, thinking that Yiyu was a scumbag. Yiyu mischievously smiled and pointed at Shui Yan, telling the girl that while Shui Yan looked great in those clothing, that didn't imply she was like her. And how everything is determined by looks. Yiyu pointed at her, told her she was unattractive, and laughed at her, which made her angry. And she screamed at him, wondering how he could call her ugly. She yelled at her brother to murder him right now. Yiyu simply smirked, and Shui burst out laughing. His brother, on the other hand, stopped his sister from doing anything and calmly told Yiyu that his sister saw him steal those clothes. This was Zhiji, the Zhang family's youthful master. When he inquired whether he still wanted to deny it, her sister gritted her teeth in rage. He was pointed at by the hero, who refuted all he stated. And he yelled at him that ignoring the facts is a disgrace, and he said he made the outfits himself. The girl was enraged and yelled at him that she was going to murder him. Yiyu simply smirked and told her not to be such a baby, saying it wasn't adorable. Ye's spirit force appeared on his hand as he grinned. Zhang Yutong flew backwards from Ye's attack with a delicate wave of his hand. She collapsed and coughed in agony. Everyone's eyes opened with surprise. They all yelled that the young lady had been knocked out with a single strike. They all thought they could beat him until they realized he was too powerful. Why don't they sneak out? The other said hesitantly. Zhang Zhiji was impressed and believed Yiyu was on a spiritual level. He bowed properly and told him, with a smile, that those were only some clothes, he could keep them. Zhang Yutong rose to her feet and dusted herself. Zhang Zhiji respectfully asked the protagonist if he could assist them and promised him a prize. Zhang Yutong screamed to her brother that Yiyu stole her clothes. Zhang Zhiji, who had a pleasant smile on his face, covered her mouth and instructed her to shut up before she could say anything else. Both Yiyu and Shui Yan were taken aback by this, as they were dumbfounded, and they both wondered aloud if he was actually his own sister. He asked them again after a minute or two, and Yiyu said that if he invited them seriously, he would grudgingly agree. Zhiji smiled as he told him a man's word, and Yiyu smiled back, saying it could never be taken back. They bumped their fists like true men, and then, from Ye's back, a devil appeared, chuckling, and told the other devil that they were strangers and that they required this fool to lead the way. The other one from Zhang Zhuji's back informed the other devil that he was a genius and that it was so easy to fool him into being his hatchet man. Both Shui Yan and Zhang Yutong were speechless as they laughed together. Zhang Yutong was enraged that Zhang Zhuji and Yiyu were getting along so well, while Shui Yan smiled and thought they were both idiots. The Zhang family merchant ship was leaving with all the people who had come out of the ship, as well as Yiyu and Shui Yan, and we could see how large the ship was. And inside the ship, Yiyu and Zhuji were conversing as he mentioned to Yiyu that Qingyang City has 4 families exploring treasure. Yiyu summarized all he was saying, informing him that his powerful people were dead and that he needed him as a shield to protect the treasure from being looted. Zhuji grinned, pleased that Yiyu understood everything, and assured him that he would lavishly compensate him after this. Yiyu laughed and told him not to worry because he's good at it. We can see powerful figures surrounding a table in a strange fashion, and Yiyu and Zhuji are going to enter. Someone smashed his fist to the table, and he yelled at Zhang Zhuji, asking him to hand over the fire spiritual elixirs he obtained from the relics. This was the Shongshan of the Qian family. Zhuji yelled at Qian Shongshan that Mr. Zhang had brought it out in a desperate endeavor, and he questioned him as to why he should give it to him, telling him that he didn't have to be upset with him. As flames crackled around Shongshan's body, Chao Shongshan became anxious as he was angered and told Zhuji to hand it over or not to blame him if he was harsh to him. Juji informed him in his dreams, as he stuttered a little. Shongshan was enraged and aimed a fire punch at him, yelling at him not to mistake his restraint for weakness. But just as he was about to punch Juji, Yiyu emerged and stopped him with his own attack. People shielded their eyes from the brightness of the attack. As they both pointed their hands to each other, a fire aura appeared around Shongshan's hand, and a blue aura appeared around Yeyu's. Yiyu smiled at Zhang Yutong and reminded her that she had promised him that she would not back down on her remarks if one condition was met. Zhang Yutong yelled at him not to bring it up again. The other people there were taken aback and wondered who he was, as well as how he could resist the attack on a spiritual level. The others told them that Qian Shongshan's scheme would fail. Juji was pleased as he complimented Yiyu on a job well done, and they both agreed that he is quite powerful. Chao Shongshan used his fire method, shouting that he had activated a little portion of his spiritual level, and that he would be able to use his spiritual level more efficiently. Chao Shongshan believed that he could not lose. Before the strike could reach him, Yiyu immediately snatched up a desk and flung it at Chao Shongshan's attack, while yelling for the kitty to get out of here. The fire cat bowed its head in defeat as the desk came down on its skull. Chao Shongshan was also vanquished after being knocked out, and his kitty was wailing in pain next to him. Yiyu smirked, knowing he was finished and Chao Shongshan had been defeated. Juji Zhang was impressed and inquired whether anyone knew anything about his family's spiritual elixir. The other disciples looked at each other, unsure what to say. Someone came forward and informed Juji Zhang that he didn't care about the spiritual elixir and that they should talk about how to open the gate cast. Another guy with gray hair agreed and told the others that it should be split evenly among the 4 families, but there was one problem: he couldn't open the chest. Juji Zhang approached them with a suggestion. He told the others that Yiyu is very powerful, then turned back with a pleased smile and begged Yiyu to please open the before he could talk any further, only to discover that Yiyu was not present. Juji Zhang looked about, concerned because he didn't know where Yiyu was. In the meantime, Yiyu was speaking with Zhang Yutong, assuring her that if he helped her brother, she would grant him a request. With a smirk on his face, Yiyu questioned her if he should let her wash his feet or sleep with him, and what she thought about being his maid. Meanwhile, Yutong Zhang was irritated. Juji Zhang approached him and whispered in his ear, asking if he could do him a favor. As Yiyu looked at the odd box, he asked him with a grin if he was sure. People around Yiyu complimented him, wondering if he was the strongest here and how they would benefit from his assistance. Assuring Yiyu that it would be simple for him, Yiyu simply listened to all of the compliments and adulation. Yiyu smirked and told himself not to be disappointed. Yiyu took out his large blade from somewhere and showed it to the others, and everyone was stunned. Their eyes opened in amazement, and some of them even had their eyeballs pop out in horror. He prepared to swing the sword at a box, and they all leapt in terror and shock, yelling for him to stop. That's the end for now.
If you enjoyed this video, then like, share and subscribe for more, and have a great day.